Chapter 86 Vet Visit. I am 15 chapters ahead on my Patreon, check it out if you are interested. patreon.com/emperordragon. Chapter 86 Vet Visit. Lucas's perspective. The drive into town passed in a strange kind of silence, the kind that wasn't exactly peaceful, but not entirely tense either. The only sound that cut through it now and then was the soft, uncertain whine of the wolfdog in the backseat. Each time, Jenny turned around to soothe him, her voice no louder than a whisper. She spoke gently, like she was trying to hold him together with words alone, promises that everything would be alright, that he wasn't alone, that help was close. I kept my eyes on the road ahead, both hands steady on the wheel, though my awareness never strayed far from the backseat. I could feel the animal's anxiety radiating outward like heat. His discomfort filled the car. He didn't trust the confined space, the unnatural smells, or the engine's low grumble beneath us. It wasn't just fear, but also unease, like his instincts were pulling him in every direction but forward. Still, he didn't lash out or try to escape. That was all Jenny. Whatever bond had formed between them was enough to hold him together, for now. When we pulled into the small lot of Beacon Hills Animal Clinic, Jenny leaned forward between the seats. We're here. It's okay. I parked close to the entrance, shut off the engine, and stepped out into the late evening air. The moment I opened the back door, the wolfdog tensed. His muscles coiled like springs, his instincts screaming at him to run. I didn't rush. I kept my movements deliberate, unthreatening. I crouched and met his eyes, letting the quiet between us settle into something solid. You're safe. I've got you. He didn't relax completely, but he allowed me to slide my arms underneath his body. He was heavy, easily over 100 pounds, but in my arms, he felt light. Jenny was already holding the door open for us by the time I reached the clinic's entrance. The small bell overhead chimed as we stepped inside. The waiting room was nearly empty. A woman sat behind the counter, flipping through paperwork, her glance flicking toward us before returning to the pages in her hands. She didn't ask questions, just took us in and went back to her work. Behind the desk, Dr. Deaton appeared, his expression calm as always. What do we have here? He asked, voice low and steady. Jenny jumped in before I could speak. He's hurt. His back leg. He needs help. Deaton nodded once. All right, let's take a look. We followed him into one of the small exam rooms. I gently laid the wolfdog down on the metal table, careful to support his weight so nothing jarred the injured leg. Even after I stepped back slightly, I kept one hand resting on his side, connection, grounding, something familiar. The moment Deaton approached, the change in the animal was immediate. A low growl began deep in his chest, his body going rigid. His ears flattened, his eyes wide. It's okay, I murmured, pressing my palm against his fur. I didn't use words, not really. Just intent. Assurance. A push of calm. The growl softened, but the fear didn't vanish. Jenny stood close, stroking the thick fur of his neck. It's okay, boy. You're safe. We're right here. Her voice wavered once, but she steadied it quickly. Brave girl. Deaton moved with the kind of patience you only learn after years of working with scared animals. He checked the dog's ears and eyes first, gauging his responses, then finally focused on the injured leg. His hands were careful, methodical, parting the fur to expose the wound beneath. It was bad, angry, swollen, and definitely infected. Jenny bit her lip, tears brimming, but she didn't cry. Instead, she rubbed the dog's head, whispering, You're strong. You can do this. When the exam was finished, Deaton's expression hardened slightly. I caught it. Jenny didn't. I placed a hand on her shoulder. Stay here with him, I told her. Keep him company. She looked at me, uncertain, but nodded. I followed Deaton into the hall. The wound is deep, he said quietly. And infected. Local anesthetic won't cut it, we'd normally need to sedate him to clean it properly. And you can't. Deaton shook his head. Not safely. He's been in the wild. Underweight. Malnourished. Stress has his blood pressure elevated. If we sedate him, his body may not handle it. I took a breath and nodded. Then I'll handle it. Deaton studied me for a long moment but didn't argue. He trusted me. Back in the room, Jenny was crouched close, still whispering reassurances. I stepped beside her, slid my hand down the wolfdog's shoulder, and wrapped my fingers gently around his paw. His body tensed at Deaton's approach, but I gave him what I'd given before, a silent vow of safety. When Deaton began treating the wound, the pain struck hard. I felt it, sharp and raw, flooding into me as if the claws were tearing my flesh instead of his. My jaw tightened, but I didn't let it show. The wolfdog's whimper cut off as the weight of it passed through him into me. His breathing steadied, his muscles loosened. Jenny blinked in surprise. He's calm. He's not even flinching. I kept my focus on the dog, letting the pain sear through me without reaction. It was nothing compared to what I'd endured before. Nothing I couldn't handle. Deaton worked quickly, cleaning the infection, dressing the wound, and wrapping it with firm, practiced movements. When it was done, he stepped back, nodding once. All finished, he said. The wolfdog blinked up at me, blue eyes clear and steady for the first time since we'd found him. Jenny stroked his muzzle, relief flooding her face. You're going to be okay, she whispered. I released his paw slowly, the last of the pain fading from my body. He didn't move away. He stayed still, watching me, like he understood. Like he knew. Chapter 87. Vet Visit. Lucas's perspective. The exam room carried the sterile, chemical scent of antiseptic, a smell that always seemed to cling to places like this, and beneath it, a faint trace of wet fur. It was sharp, unmistakable, and unsettling, a lingering reminder of everything that had just happened. Jenny was on the floor, kneeling beside the wolfdog like she'd always belonged there. Her hand moved gently along the curve of his neck, fingers threading through his thick fur in a rhythm meant to soothe. She whispered to him softly, words of comfort and praise tumbling endlessly from her lips. Her voice, barely audible, was more for him than for anyone else, a quiet balm for a frightened creature who didn't yet understand he was safe. Deaton approached silently, then leaned down and placed a small brown paper bag in Jenny's hands. It crinkled softly, the sound oddly intimate in the quiet room. Keep him calm, he said, his voice low and even. There was a kind of practiced calm to him, the kind you only developed after years of tending both animals and people. Let him know he did well. Jenny nodded earnestly. Her eyes shimmered, not quite with tears, but with something tender and deep. She crouched a little lower and pulled out one of the treats. The wolfdog lifted his head with caution, sniffing the air before leaning forward and taking it from her hand with a careful, almost delicate movement. It was a small thing, but the way Jenny's face lit up, you'd think she'd just received the greatest gift in the world. Deaton caught my eye, then gestured with a tilt of his head toward the hallway. I followed him, stepping out into the corridor as the exam room door clicked quietly shut behind us. Ordinarily, he began, folding his arms over his chest, after a procedure like this, we'd want to keep him under observation for at least 48 hours. Monitor for infection, stress reactions, the usual post-op protocol. His voice was all professionalism, clipped and clinical, though not without compassion. But then he let out a breath and softened just slightly. But something tells me that's not going to work with this one. I nodded. He'd tear it apart, or himself apart, before he settled down. Deaton studied me a moment before continuing. I'll write out a week's dosage of antibiotics. You won't have trouble getting him to take them. No, I said simply. The wound will heal, he said. He's young, still growing. As long as he gets proper food and nutrition, he should make a full recovery. That was all I needed to hear. I dipped my head in a quiet nod. Good. When we stepped back into the room, Jenny was crouched on the floor, still trying to bribe him with treats and, apparently, names. What about Peanut? She asked brightly. The wolfdog blinked once, unimpressed. She didn't miss a beat. Okay. Not a Peanut. What about Snugglezilla? I raised an eyebrow. Really? Jenny shot me a look but kept going. Cuddles. The wolfdog let out what sounded suspiciously like a long-suffering sigh. Or maybe that was just me projecting. Either way, he clearly wasn't buying what she was selling. I took a step closer, letting my presence settle over him like a shadow. His eyes tracked me, those vivid blue irises alert, but no longer fearful. Just watchful. Waiting. Those names don't suit him, I said. He's not soft. I paused, studying him. How about Milo? The name came from nowhere, but it felt right the second I said it. Feels like a Milo. His ears twitched, then perked up. He tilted his head, a flicker of curiosity, no, recognition, in his gaze. Something subtle but undeniable shifted in him. Jenny gasped. He likes it. Then her face fell into a pout. But I wanted to name him. Before she could sulk further, I crouched and rested my hand on his head. Milo, I said again, firm but warm. He answered with a sharp, happy bark that made both Jenny and me smile despite ourselves. Jenny's pout melted into laughter. Okay, fine. Milo it is. Treatment's done, I told her, straightening. Time to take him home. While Jenny stayed behind, still fussing over Milo like he was a newborn, I made my way to the front desk. Deaton's assistant handed over a small bag, medications, pet food, written instructions. Everything we'd need for the next few days. I thanked her, handed over my card, and signed the receipt without really looking. I was already thinking about the logistics of keeping Milo safe at the estate. When I returned to the waiting room, Jenny was sitting cross-legged on the floor with Milo's head in her lap. She looked up at me, eyes sparkling with relief. Ready? I asked. She nodded slowly, then stood, reluctant to break the contact. I lifted Milo again, careful with his bandaged leg. He was lighter than he should have been, bones sharp beneath the thick fur. Jenny followed close behind as I carried him out to the car. I opened the backseat door and laid him down as gently as I could, making sure his injured leg was cradled and unstrained. Jenny climbed in right after, settling beside him, her hand already smoothing down his coat. I slid into the driver's seat, turned the key, and the engine rumbled to life. As I adjusted the mirror, I caught a glimpse of them in the reflection, Jenny smiling softly, Milo's head nestled comfortably in her lap, his eyes slowly closing in contentment. For the first time since we found him, Milo looked truly comfortable, at ease. Chapter 88, First Impressions. Lucas's perspective. The drive back from the clinic was quiet, Milo curled up in the backseat with his head resting in Jenny's lap. She stroked his fur absent-mindedly, her eyes fixed on him as if afraid he'd vanish if she looked away. I glanced at them in the rearview mirror. They both looked drained, but there was a calmness there too, like Milo had already claimed his place. Still, after everything that happened, I figured they deserved more than just a straight ride home. Jenny especially. She'd been strong for Milo, steady when he needed her most. She earned something for that. So I pulled the car into a little lot downtown, right in front of the ice cream shop. Jenny blinked at the sign, then looked at me, confused. Why are we here? Because, I said, stepping out, you and Milo deserve a treat. By the time she climbed out with Milo, I was already inside, ordering 2 cones, chocolate swirl for her, plain vanilla for me, and slipping one of the dog treats I'd bought earlier into my pocket. When I came back out, the two of them were settled at one of the tables on the patio, Jenny humming happily as Milo sniffed the air, his ears twitching at all the new smells. Delivery service, I said, handing her the cone. She grinned, taking it like it was treasure. I set my cone down, tore open the little treat bag, and tossed Milo a piece. He sniffed it suspiciously before crunching it down, his blue eyes flicking up at me like I'd just passed some kind of test. We sat there together, just the 3 of us, cooling down after everything at the clinic. The sun was dropping low, painting the shop windows orange. Jenny kicked her legs beneath the table, lost in the simple bliss of her ice cream. Milo's tail thumped lazily against the concrete, content. For once, there was no tension. Just, normal. But then Jenny's expression shifted. She went quiet, thoughtful, her spoon pausing halfway to her mouth. What is it? I asked, already sensing trouble. She hesitated before speaking. So, the thing is, she twirled the spoon in her cup. As far as Susan's concerned, I'm not allowed to have a pet. I froze mid-bite, narrowing my eyes at her playfully. And you didn't mention this until now. Jenny winced, but then quickly brightened. But, I'm sure Susan would say yes, if you ask her. I shook my head. That's because Susan feels guilty. I'm not going to use that. You're going to have to ask for her permission yourself. Jenny's lower lip jutted out in an exaggerated pout. She turned to Milo dramatically, resting her chin on his head. You hear that? No one's on our side, Milo. It's just the 2 of us against the world. Milo gave a small huff, like he agreed. Jenny smirked and went back to her ice cream, and I leaned back in my chair, watching them. I wasn't worried. If Jenny wanted Milo here, really wanted him, Susan wouldn't stand a chance. The drive back to the estate was quiet except for the sound of Milo's steady breathing in the backseat. He had curled up again, head in Jenny's lap, while she absent-mindedly stroked his fur. Her ice cream must have done the trick, because she was humming, soft and content, like nothing in the world could go wrong now. I knew better. The moment we pulled into the Lockwood driveway, I caught a familiar car parked out front. Susan was home. Jenny didn't notice, too busy whispering nonsense to Milo as we made our way to the front door. But the second we stepped inside and Susan appeared in the foyer, arms crossed, eyes sharp as steel, it was over before it even began. No. That was it. No explanation. No hesitation. Just a single word directed at the wolfdog trailing behind us. Jenny gasped, as though Susan had just outlawed breathing. But, you don't even know him yet. I don't need to know him, Susan said firmly. The answer is no. Jenny clutched Milo's collar like Susan was about to drag him away herself. Please, Susan, I'll be responsible. I'll feed him, take him on walks, brush his fur, everything. Susan's expression didn't budge. Do you not remember the time you killed 3 pet goldfish in 1 week? Jenny's face went crimson. Don't bring Mr. Whiskers 1, 2, and 3 into this. And that was because I was just a young girl who loved them too much. Susan arched a brow. That was just 2 years ago. Jenny sputtered. I was practically a baby. You were 14, Susan deadpanned. I can't let this poor dog suffer the same fate. Jenny groaned, throwing her head back in dramatic despair. Then she turned those pleading eyes on me, the kind that could melt steel beams. I held firm for all of 3 seconds. Then I sighed, rubbing my temple. I'll be the one who takes care of Milo, I said finally. I'll feed him, walk him, and make sure Jenny doesn't spoil him into an early grave. Jenny gasped and punched my arm lightly, but I ignored her. Susan gave me a long look, the kind of stare that measured every word, searching for cracks. At last, her shoulders softened just a little. If you're the one responsible, then fine. But the moment I see him chewing on the furniture, he's gone. Jenny squealed so loudly that Milo barked in surprise, his tail wagging like he'd just understood the verdict. She hugged him tightly, whispering triumph into his fur. I shook my head, already regretting the deal, but when Milo wagged again and pressed his head against Jenny's side, I couldn't help but smile. Chapter 89. Questions. Lucas's perspective. I set Milo down inside my room, letting him sniff around while Jenny hovered at my shoulder like a proud parent on the first day of school. He patted cautiously across the rug, ears twitching, eyes bright but wary, still half-willed, still testing this new place. I crouched low, catching his gaze, and let the red bleed faintly into my irises. Not a threat, just a signal, a thread of silent communication between us. You're safe. This is your den now. Milo's tense body loosened almost instantly. He exhaled, circled once near the far corner, and flopped down as though he had already claimed the spot for himself. Jenny's jaw dropped. How did you do that? He's actually listening to you. Like a perfectly trained dog. He is smart, I murmured, scratching behind Milo's ears. He thumped his tail once in response. He just seems to understand me. Jenny narrowed her eyes like I'd just cheated on some unwritten rule of bonding. Unfair. I've been trying for weeks and he still runs from me if I sneeze. I smirked. Maybe you should work on your sneezing. She swatted my arm, but I stood and motioned for one of the house staff to bring up 2 bowls. A moment later, I had them filled, water in one, food in the other. But before I slid the food over, I knelt again and held the pill in my palm under Milo's nose. He sniffed it, wrinkled his muzzle, and gave a low huff that was basically a no thanks. I met his eyes and gave a slow, deliberate nod. He hesitated, then opened his mouth and took the pill without another sound, as though my approval was the only condition he needed. Jenny's eyes nearly popped out of her head. You're kidding me. He just ate it. He never eats directly from my hands, and he just listens to you. I didn't answer, just slid the food bowl to Milo. He dug in immediately, eating like he hadn't seen a proper meal in weeks. Jenny crouched down beside him, watching with wide-eyed wonder as if the sight of him eating was the greatest thing she'd ever witnessed. My phone buzzed. I pulled it out and glanced at the screen. Isaac. Need to talk. Can you meet me? I locked the phone, slid it back into my pocket, and stood. I've got to head out for a bit, I told Jenny. If Susan asks, tell her I'll be back before dinner. And don't stay here too long, he needs rest after today. Jenny pouted but nodded, already stroking Milo's fur. Fine. But don't be surprised if he likes me better by the time you get back. I raised a brow. Good luck with that. Milo continued eating his food, not the least bit interested in our conversation. The cemetery was hushed when I arrived, cloaked in the kind of silence that doesn't just fill your ears, it settles into your chest, heavy and unshakable, like the weight of something left unsaid. The wind barely stirred the trees lining the edge of the graveyard, and even the birds seemed to have gone quiet, as if the whole place was holding its breath. He stood a few yards ahead, leaning against the base of a time-worn angel statue, its stone wings chipped at the edges, the face weathered by decades of rain and time. His arms were crossed tightly over his chest, jaw tense, eyes fixed on nothing in particular. He looked like someone who'd been arguing with himself for hours, locked in an internal fight he couldn't quite win. I didn't need to ask what this was about. I already knew. Malia told me about Allison, he started, straight to the point. And her family. I sighed, nodding once. She told you about hunters during training, right? Yeah. Isaac shifted uneasily, his voice caught between confusion and frustration. According to Malia, shapeshifters and hunters are on the same side. That's what she said. But when she talked about the Argents, it was different. Like I should be afraid of them. Like I should stay as far away from Allison and her family as possible. It's complicated, I said quietly. Isaac frowned. So which is it? Are they allies or enemies? Neither. I met his gaze. The hunters aren't our enemies. I was raised by one. But, the Argents and the Hales. I shook my head. That's different. Tense doesn't even begin to cover it. Why? Isaac pressed. I looked out at the rows of headstones, letting the weight of it settle before answering. 6 years ago, Gerard Argent, his hunters and most of the Hale pack worked together to put down something corrupted. A creature that needed killing. They succeeded. But no one survived that night. Not the hunters. Not the Hales. His expression darkened, a line forming between his brows. So you're saying they died fighting together? I shook my head slowly. That's what the official story would like people to believe. But the truth is murkier than that. Wolfsbane was found on the Hale bodies. Hunter bodies looked like they were ripped apart by werewolf claws. I let the words hang there. It took a lot of digging to piece even that much together. I said, softer now. A lot of whispers, records that didn't match up, things people didn't want to talk about. But beyond that, no one alive really knows what happened out there. Maybe no one ever will. Isaac looked away, his mouth pressed into a tight line, but the storm in his eyes was obvious. He didn't speak, but the questions, dozens of them, were etched all over his face. Questions I couldn't answer. Questions no one could. The cemetery felt colder somehow. The kind of chill that sinks into your bones when the past refuses to stay buried. Chapter 90. Unraveling the Knots. Lucas's perspective. Isaac's shoulders tensed the moment his eyes met mine, like he was bracing himself for a blow. He hesitated for half a second before his voice finally broke the quiet between us. So, what should I do? I didn't hesitate. My voice came out steady and flat. Nothing. This history between the Hales and the Argents, I continued, my eyes narrowing slightly, it has nothing to do with you. His brow furrowed immediately, knitting together in visible frustration. I could see it bubbling in him before he even opened his mouth. How can you say that? His voice was sharper now, awash with emotion. Molly is my friend, and then there's Allison. I let out a quiet breath through my nose, keeping my voice calm but firm. Measured. Isaac, I get that this feels big to you. But this, whatever tension is hanging between those families, that has nothing to do with you. You weren't part of it then. And you don't need to be now. His face tightened with frustration. How can you say that like it's simple? I stepped toward him, keeping my tone level but pointed. 6 years ago, both families lost people. In one night. And not just one or two, they lost a lot of people. It was brutal. It was messy. And despite everything, the suspicions, the grudges, the blood between them, they didn't just turn and start slaughtering each other. Isaac's gaze dropped, the tension in his shoulders starting to waver. You think they're that reckless? I continued. That they'd blow everything up just because you've been exchanging glances and half-smiles with Allison Argent in the hallway between second and third period. I let the question hang in the air, sharp and unyielding. Slowly, his defiance cracked. The fight drained out of his posture, leaving only uncertainty. His head shook once, small, reluctant. Given the circumstances, it's natural for Malia to feel wary. I pressed on, softening my tone but not my stance. She doesn't trust the Argents, and maybe she never will. That's her burden, not yours. I leaned slightly closer, making sure my next words cut through the fog in his mind. But what's happening between you and Allison? That isn't about politics. It isn't about ancient grudges. It's just you. A boy. And her. A girl. The same thing that's happened to 1,000 other teenagers in this town since forever. I could see him chewing on my words, jaw tight, eyes flicking away from me toward the floor. He didn't argue this time, but the storm inside him was still there, I could feel it. Still, the edge of his conviction dulled, and that was enough. Don't let someone else's ghosts complicate something that hasn't even begun, I said at last, my voice dropping lower, more deliberate. For a moment, silence lingered between us. Then Isaac gave the smallest nod, though his eyes betrayed the doubt still clinging to him. Malia told me Allison is probably already a hunter, or on her way to being one. She's not wrong, I admitted. Isaac hesitated, then asked the question I knew was burning in him from the moment this started. So, should I tell her that I'm a werewolf? My gaze sharpened, drilling into him, the answer ready before he finished the sentence. Isaac, listen to yourself. All you've done is flirt with her, passing smiles and casual conversations between classes, that's it. You didn't even know her 2 weeks ago. He parted his lips to object, but I stopped him with just the lift of my brow. If you're looking for my advice, it's this, I added dryly, letting just enough sarcasm curl around the words to cut through his tension. Maybe hold off on sharing life-altering secrets until, I don't know, the third date at least. The remark landed exactly as I intended. His shoulders loosened, the built-up tension in his expression finally breaking. A sheepish smile tugged unbidden at the corner of his mouth, small but genuine. He shook his head slightly, finally seeing the humor and the truth in what I'd said. He was overthinking it. And now, finally, he knew it. Back at Lockwood Estate. Jenny's perspective. I stretched out on the rug in Lucas's room, chin propped on my hands, watching Milo. He was lying in the corner on the soft blanket Lucas had picked out, his ears twitching every now and then as if he were listening to sounds only he could hear. Come on, Milo, I whispered, holding out my hand like Lucas had done. Milo's bright blue eyes flicked toward me, cautious at first, then softer. He sniffed the air, pushed himself up with that slow, careful grace, and patted over to me. My heart jumped in excitement as his wet nose brushed against my fingers. You're so much braver than Lucas thinks, I said, stroking the side of his head. His fur was thick and rougher, but warm, like he carried the whole forest in him. He gave a low, almost questioning whine. I giggled. Oh, I get it, you like Lucas better, huh? Figures. Milo tilted his head, and for a second I swore he understood me. He looked back toward the door where Lucas had left and then back at me, ears perked. Yeah, I miss him too, I said softly. I pulled out something I had begged the staff to dig out of storage, an old knotted rope. At first, Milo only stared at it, suspicious. But when I dangled it just enough, his instincts kicked in. He growled playfully and tugged the rope right out of my hands. Hey! I laughed, trying to snatch it back. Milo dodged me with surprising speed for a dog who had been hurt only hours ago. His tail wagged furiously, and for the first time, I saw the shimmer of a smile. Yes, dogs could smile, I decided then and there. We played like that for a while, the room echoing with the sound of my laughter and his happy grunts. Every time he let me win, I scratched behind his ears until his eyes closed in bliss. It wasn't hard to forget that Susan had almost said no. Eventually, Milo settled down again, curling into his blanket. His breathing grew steady, deeper, almost like a soft snore. I sat beside him, running my fingers through his fur. You're safe now, Milo, I whispered, leaning close. I won't let anything happen to you. And neither will Lucas. The words surprised me as they left my mouth. I had promised Susan that I'd be responsible, but now, with Milo's warmth pressed against my leg, it wasn't a promise to her anymore. It was to him. Chapter 91. Safety Net. Lucas's perspective. The alarm clock blinked 7 o'clock when my eyes opened, but I didn't even need it. What did wake me, though, was a pair of bright blue eyes staring straight into mine. Milo. He was sitting right next to my bed, head tilted slightly, his stare unbroken. No growls, no whining, just that look that screamed, I'm hungry, feed me. I rubbed my face and chuckled. You sure adapted quickly. Just yesterday you were wild and shy, now look at you. Reaching out, I patted his head. His tail thumped the floor like a drum. I got up, went to his food bowl, and poured in the kibble. Milo dug in like he hadn't eaten in years, his whole body vibrating with excitement. While he ate, I focused my senses on him. His wound was healing well, the infection already fading, the tissue knitting itself back together. Strong, resilient. Good boy, I muttered as he licked the bowl clean. Afterward, I opened the door, and Milo bounded outside with me close behind. No leash. He didn't need one, he stayed close, circling the garden, occasionally pausing to sniff a bush or chase a falling leaf. I stretched and started running my laps, feeling Milo's eyes on me every time I passed by. By the time I showered and headed downstairs, he was right behind me, paws tapping on the wood floor. Susan and Jenny were already at the table. Jenny lit up when she saw Milo and immediately slipped him a strip of bacon under the table. He took it delicately, then wagged his tail so hard his whole body shook. Jenny, Susan's voice cut across the room. Jenny froze mid-bite of her own bacon. What? Susan folded her arms. Don't overfeed him. You'll spoil him. Jenny pouted but pulled her hand back. Milo looked betrayed for a moment before plopping onto the floor at my feet. But I caught it, the faintest tug at Susan's lips, almost a smile. She reached down, brushed her hand against Milo's back, and then went right back to sipping her coffee as if nothing happened. For all her sternness, she was softening. Breakfast passed in quiet comfort, the kind of domestic calm I hadn't realized I'd missed. When the plates were cleared, I grabbed my bag. Jenny, practically bouncing, followed me to the car with Milo padding after us. At the door, Susan stopped us. He stays here, she said, looking at Milo. Jenny groaned, but Milo only wagged his tail and sat obediently beside her. I smirked. Don't worry. He'll keep the house safe. Susan rolled her eyes, but she didn't argue. That was as close to approval as she ever going to give. Jenny and I headed out to the car. Milo barked once, sharp and clear, as if to say goodbye. I gave him a quick nod before sliding into the driver's seat. Time for school. A few hours later. Erica's perspective. Gym class. The one period in the day that always made my stomach twist. Coach had us doing rope climbs again. Just seeing the rope dangling there from the rafters was enough to remind me of last time, how pathetic I'd looked, wheezing, weak arms giving out halfway up. People had laughed. I pretended not to hear, but the memory never left me. Not today. I'd been training on my own, pushing through the fear, building myself up bit by bit. Today I was going to prove, to them, to coach, but mostly to myself, that I wasn't the same fragile girl anymore. Erica. Coach barked. I stepped forward, heart pounding, palms a little sweaty, but my chest was full of fire. I grabbed the rope. At my side another boy started up his rope, someone normal, healthy. The perfect comparison. I climbed. Hand over hand. Legs kicking. Muscles burning but holding. To my surprise, I was matching him. Step for step. My arms felt strong, steady. For the first time, I didn't feel like I was about to collapse. For the first time, I actually believed I could make it to the top. And then it hit me. The warning flicker, the static building inside my skull. My breath hitched. No, not now. Please, not now. But there's no bargaining with it. The seizure slammed into me like a wall, ripping the strength right out of my arms. My hands slipped. The world lurched, tilting violently as I plummeted backward. Gasps echoed from below, coach shouting my name. And then, arms. Strong, steady arms caught me before I hit the floor. I blinked through the haze, disoriented, heart hammering. Lucas. Of course it was Lucas. He held me easily, as if I weighed nothing. His face calm, eyes steady, light catching me from 15 feet up was the most normal thing in the world. I didn't understand how he got to me so fast, but right then I didn't care. All I knew was I was safe. Coach was already yelling. Idiots. Get out of the way. Lockwood, take her to the nurse's office. Lucas didn't argue. He just adjusted his hold on me, carrying me bridal style as if it were no trouble at all. The hallway lights blurred above me, the seizure still making everything swim, but the warmth of his chest kept me grounded. By the time the nurse finished checking me over, the worst had passed. I felt drained, small, but alive. And there he was. Still sitting in the chair next to the cot. Still steady, still calm, like he'd wait forever if I needed. You okay? He asked, voice quiet, meant only for me. I nodded, throat tight. Thanks, for catching me. His mouth quirked, just a fraction of a smile. You're welcome. My heart gave a strange little twist, one I couldn't quite explain. Gratitude, sure. Relief, definitely. But something else too, something warmer, something that made my cheeks flush. Maybe I was imagining it. Or maybe I wasn't. I looked away before he could notice. But the feeling stayed. Chapter 92. Fire. Lucas's perspective. I left Erica with the nurse, making sure she was stable before slipping out. My chest still carried the echo of catching her, the faint tremor of adrenaline that hadn't quite burned away. I headed straight for the boys' washroom, needing a moment to breathe, to rinse off the weight. Cold water hit my face, sharp and grounding. I leaned over the sink, palms braced, watching the droplets race down porcelain. My reflection stared back at me, unreadable. Then the door creaked open. I straightened, already reaching for a paper towel, when a flash of red hair in the mirror made me pause. Lydia. You're not supposed to be in here, I said, drying my face with slow, deliberate movements. She just smiled, that sly curve of her lips that could disarm half the school. And then she closed the distance. Smooth, graceful, deliberate. The smell of her perfume filled the tiled room, sharp and sweet, impossible to ignore. I saw what you did, she purred, her voice dipped in honey. A hero swooping in to save the day, her eyes flicked over me, amusement sparking in their green depths. Heroes should be rewarded. She rose up slightly, lips parting, face tilting toward mine. I caught her shoulders before she could close the gap. Firm, steady. Just inches apart but not touching. Lydia, I said evenly, locking my gaze on hers, I know what this is. You're doing it to amuse yourself, and to make Jackson jealous. But I'm not going to be your little play toy. Her smile only deepened, turning sharper, more dangerous. She leaned into my grip, not resisting but pressing closer, as though testing how firm my line really was. This has nothing to do with Jackson, she whispered, lashes lowering just slightly. I don't know what it is about you, Lucas, but you've definitely caught my attention. I shook my head, holding her steady. Be that as it may, I'm still not interested. And I don't do cheating. That only seemed to embolden her. She tilted her head, her breath brushing against my cheek, her words a low, sultry taunt. Don't lie. You do a great job of hiding it, but I can tell, you find me attractive. Everyone does. As for cheating, she continued, her smile turning razor sharp, Jackson fools around with other girls all the time. He thinks I don't know. So it's not much of a betrayal if I start doing it too. I didn't move. Didn't let her see a flicker of reaction. But my body betrayed me in another way. With my heightened senses, I could tell when someone lied, and Lydia wasn't lying now. Her words rang with truth. No hesitation. No false note. I stood there, still holding her shoulders, her face mere inches from mine. The tension between us was sharp enough to cut through the silence of the tiled room. Neither of us moved. Every instinct in me screamed to let her go, but another part, the cursed part of me, a teenage boy and a werewolf, didn't want to. She was right. She was beautiful, sharp, confident. Who wouldn't be attracted to her? Her perfume wrapped around me, sweet and intoxicating, mingling with the faint, metallic tang of adrenaline in her blood. My heightened senses betrayed me, picking up the rapid flutter of her pulse, the warmth radiating from her skin. I knew her attraction was real, and that knowledge sent a jolt through me, unraveling the edges of my self-control. Damn teenage hormones, I thought, forcing myself to steady my breath. But it wasn't just that. It was her, the way her lips curved into a knowing smile, the way her green eyes locked onto mine, daring me. For a long moment, we just stood there, unflinching, the air between us thick with something unspoken. I told myself to resist, to stand firm, but my resolve was crumbling. I leaned in, drawn by the magnetic pull of her presence. Our lips met, and the world narrowed to just the two of us. The kiss was fire, fierce, demanding, the kind that made my pulse roar in my ears and my thoughts dissolve into static. For once, I wasn't measured, wasn't calculating, I was just lost in the heat of her, the softness of her lips, the way her breath hitched against mine. Lydia matched me, her hands sliding up my chest, fingers curling into the fabric of my shirt like she never wanted to let go. She kissed me with a hunger that made it impossible to remember why this was supposed to be wrong. The scent of her shampoo, the warmth of her body pressed against mine, it was overwhelming, intoxicating. Then, footsteps echoed in the hallway. My ears twitched, instinct snapping me back to reality. Without thinking, I pulled her into one of the stalls, easing the door shut behind us. We stood there, close, our breaths ragged, our faces still just inches apart. The space was small, the air thick with the heat of our bodies and the lingering taste of her on my lips. For a second, neither of us spoke. The footsteps faded away into silence, but the tension between us didn't. Lydia let out a small, breathless laugh, her lips still parted, her eyes shining with something wild and exhilarated. I forced myself to meet her gaze, clinging to what little restraint I had left. I didn't trust myself to say anything. Not yet. But from the way she looked at me, amused, triumphant, like she'd just discovered a secret she had no intention of giving up, I knew one thing for certain. Whatever had just happened between us, it had left its mark on both of us. Chapter 93. Aftertaste. Lydia's perspective. Lydia leaned back against the stall door, her chest rising and falling as if she'd just run a marathon. Her lips still tingled, and her mind, normally so precise and untouchable, felt scattered. That wasn't supposed to happen. She had gone into the boys' bathroom intending to play a game. Push Lucas's buttons. Make Jackson jealous. Keep herself entertained. Easy. Predictable. That's how it always worked. She pulled the strings, and boys danced. But Lucas hadn't danced. He hadn't flattered her, hadn't stumbled over his words. He saw her coming from a mile away and still managed to resist. Until he didn't. Her fingers brushed against her own lips, betraying her thoughts. That kiss hadn't been like the others, no posturing, no ego. Lucas kissed her like he meant it, like he couldn't help himself. And worse, she had kissed him the same way. Get a grip, Lydia. She tried to smother the grin tugging at the corners of her mouth. This was dangerous. Lucas wasn't like Jackson. Jackson was easy to manipulate, easy to forgive when he slipped up because his vanity made him predictable. Lucas, on the other hand, was steady, unreadable in ways that annoyed her and intrigued her all at once. And then there was the way he'd pulled her into the stall, protective and sharp at the same time. Not panicked, not fumbling, just controlled, decisive. The kind of thing that made her pulse quicken far more than she wanted to admit. She told herself it was strategy, that getting closer to Lucas could be useful. He was strong, respected, annoyingly calm under pressure. Having someone like that wrapped around her finger. Valuable. But when she thought back to the heat of his kiss, the steadiness of his hands, the way his eyes had locked onto hers, her heart gave her away. Because if she was honest with herself, really honest, this wasn't just about strategy anymore. Lydia Martin never lost control. Except, apparently, around Lucas. By the time Lydia walked out of the boys' bathroom, her lipstick was perfect again, hair smoothed, composure restored. If anyone had seen her minutes before, pressed against a stall door, breathing fast, lips swollen, they'd never believe it now. That was Lydia's gift. No cracks, no tells. She spotted Jackson down the hall leaning against a locker, his usual posture, half boredom, half posing. The sight of him used to make her stomach flip. Now, it just didn't. Still, she slipped back into her role without hesitation. Hey, handsome, she said lightly, voice syrup sweet as she touched Jackson's arm. Jackson's smirk spread instantly, ego fed on cue. There you are. Thought you were hiding from me. Hiding. From you. Lydia tilted her head, eyes wide with feigned innocence. As if I could. Jackson chuckled, satisfied. Not a flicker of suspicion in his eyes. He never doubted her. That was the beauty of Jackson. He was so convinced of his own importance that the idea of Lydia being interested in someone else wouldn't even cross his mind. As he launched into a story about practice, Lydia nodded, laughed in the right places, smiled when he wanted her to. But inside her head, the memory of Lucas lingered. The steadiness of his hands. The way he'd kissed her. And she hated that she couldn't shake it. Jackson leaned closer, brushing a kiss against her temple, and Lydia let him. To anyone watching, they were still the golden couple, perfect, untouchable. Exactly as she wanted it. But her pulse betrayed her. It wasn't racing for Jackson. And as Lydia smiled up at him, her mind whispered a dangerous truth she refused to say aloud. He'll never know. He can't know. And yet, I can't stop thinking about Lucas. Lucas's perspective. I leaned against the cool tile of the bathroom stall after Lydia left, letting out a long breath I didn't even know I was holding. My pulse was still hammering in my ears, and if I closed my eyes I could still feel her lips, her nails, the heat of it all. It was intoxicating. And it caught me off guard. Because I knew better. I knew exactly who Lydia was, what she was capable of. Smart, manipulative, gorgeous, too gorgeous, and tangled up with Jackson. Off limits. Completely off limits. And yet, the moment she leaned in, all that logic had burned away. My self-control, something I prided myself on, shattered under the weight of teenage hormones and the simple truth of the heat between us. For a few reckless minutes, that had been enough. Now, with the fire cooling, regret started crawling in. What were you thinking? I rubbed my face with both hands, trying to erase the memory, but it clung stubbornly. It wasn't just a kiss. It wasn't just a mistake. It was a warning, how quickly I could lose myself if I wasn't careful. Desire tugged at me still, whispering that it had felt good, that part of me wanted more. But I clenched my jaw and shoved it down. I couldn't go down that road. Not with Lydia. This had to stay what it was. A slip. Nothing more. I straightened, forced my breathing steady, and checked myself in the mirror. No redness, no flustered look, good. No one needed to know what just happened. Especially not Jackson. By the time I walked out of the bathroom and back into the hallway, my face was calm, my stride steady. Just another student heading back to class like nothing had happened. And that's exactly how it was going to stay. Chapter 94. A warning ignored. The morning sun hung low but sharp in the sky, spilling gold across the cracked pavement of the nearly deserted gas station. This was the quiet, in-between hour of the day, past the bustle of commuters heading to work, yet not quite late enough for the roads to empty under the noon heat. At the edge of town, the station sat lonely and still, the only sound the flick of moths against the humming light fixture and the distant rustle of warm wind through dry grass. Derek Hale's eyes felt like lead weights, dragging with every blink. His body was a machine that had been running for too long without oil, creaking, straining, threatening to collapse under the weight of exhaustion. Sleep had become a stranger, something he glimpsed on the horizon but never reached. Even now, pulling his car into the wide emptiness of a forgotten station at the edge of Beacon Hills, there was no peace. Just the steady hum of his nerves and the sharp gnaw of unrest grinding away at his chest. He stepped out, sliding the nozzle into the tank, the hum of gasoline rushing into the car disturbingly loud in the stillness. The ordinary silence of morning should have been calming. It wasn't. His shoulders ached, every nerve charged. His mind refused peace. For days, Derek had been tracking the Argents, their trucks, their routes, the edges of their patrols. Laura's voice haunted him, her warning, sharp with authority, leave them. Do not poke at the hornet's nest. He had tried to obey, if only for her sake. But how could he? Not with these hunters in Beacon Hills, not with so much blood between their family and his. The low rumble of an engine broke his thoughts. A beat-up pickup truck rolled into the station, its headlights cutting across Derek like a spotlight. He didn't need to see the plates. He knew the truck. He had tailed it just last night, watched the men inside patrol the outskirts like hunting dogs. 3 hunters stepped out. Derek's jaw tightened. He could smell the metal of their weapons, the stench of arrogance on their skin. The oldest moved first. His every step was smooth but deliberate, measured like the line of his voice when it carried across the glowing lot. Calm, but knife sharp. Chris Argent says you've been sniffing around where you don't belong. He told us to deliver a message. Stay away. Derek's hand flexed on the pump handle, but he didn't move. His green eyes locked onto the men, unblinking. You finished. The reply came not in words but action. The youngest, fresh-faced, mid-20s at most, swaggered past him. He didn't even spare Derek a glance. His elbow jolted out, striking Derek's car window in a single, sharp motion. Glass rained instantly, scattering into 1,000 glittering fragments that caught the morning sun like cruel little diamonds. Derek's nostrils flared. His chest burned with a heat that was all fury and no air. For a heartbeat he swayed on the edge of violence, every instinct screaming to tear the smugness off the guy's face and leave nothing but blood in its place. But he stood there, fists trembling, jaw clenched tight enough to ache. The older hunter caught the kid's shoulder and hissed, enough. Chris said just a warning. But restraint meant nothing now, the warning had already burned to ash. The younger smirked, cruel satisfaction curling his lips as he spat his venom. The Hales. Always so proud. So untouchable. But tell me, your family wasn't so mighty that night, were they? The words hit harder than any weapon. They were gasoline to dry sparks. Derek snapped. One instant he was still, a coil of silent threat. The next, he was motion, pure, feral, unrestrained. His fist drove into the guy's gut with the force of a hammer through wood. Air rushed out of the guy in a strangled gasp as his knees buckled. Derek didn't wait. He pivoted, his second blow cracking hard against another hunter's jaw, the sound echoing as the man crashed wildly into the side of the gas pump. The fight exploded. Knives flashed quick and merciless in the sunlight. One blade cut across Derek's arm, leaving a jagged streak of scarlet. He hardly felt it. He drove a punch into the man's ribs, his knuckles struck bone, ribs snapping beneath his punch, a sickening, hollow crack. Another hunter swung a blade, but Derek ducked, his body flowing like instinct itself, before he seized the attacker and slammed him across the hood of the beat-up pickup. The impact caved the metal in, a drumbeat of violence that shook the ground. They kept coming, trained, relentless, but Derek was fury in motion. His fists were fast, his strikes brutal. He fought like a predator who'd had enough of being caged. Still, it wasn't clean. A knife raked across his side. Another grazed his shoulder. Blood darkened his shirt, but his expression never broke. He fought through the pain, striking harder, faster, until all 3 hunters were on the ground, groaning, broken, and very far from smug. Breathing hard, Derek stood over them, chest rising and falling like a storm finally breaking. His knuckles dripped with both his blood and theirs. Without another word, he walked back to his car. His shattered window sparkled in the sunlight as he climbed inside. The engine roared to life, and Derek pulled away, leaving the three hunters battered in the dust, their warning delivered back tenfold. But in the rearview mirror, Derek's own reflection stared back at him. Tired, bleeding, and more haunted than ever. Chapter 95. Wait. Derek's car sped down the lonely stretch of road, the cracked window whistling against the air. His hands were tight on the wheel, blood still drying on his knuckles. The cut along his ribs burned with every breath, but the pain grounded him. It reminded him he was alive. It reminded him of his mistake. Laura was right. He should have left the Argents alone. Watching them was one thing, but engaging them, letting them provoke him, was exactly the kind of reckless choice that drew bloodshed closer. He could already hear Laura's voice in his head, calm but sharp. You're playing right into their hands, Derek. Do you want to start a war? His jaw tightened. He didn't want a war. But he didn't want to run, either. Not again. The image of the young hunter's sneer replayed in his mind, the venom in his words. Funny, your family wasn't so mighty that night. That one had cut deeper than any blade. The ghosts of his family still clung to Derek. Their smells, their voices. His mother's voice, gone in an instant. He had tried to bury those memories, but all it took was a single insult to rip them wide open. He pulled the car onto a deserted side road and killed the engine. Silence pressed in. Derek leaned back against the seat, pressing his hand against his bleeding side. The wound was shallow, already knitting together, but it left him weary. He hated this cycle between the two families. And every time, blood spilled on both sides until the ground itself seemed poisoned with it. Laura wanted peace. She believed it was still possible, that the Hales could coexist with the Argents without more graves being dug. Derek wanted to believe her. But today had proven otherwise. The hunters were still watching, still waiting, still carrying Silver and Wolfsbane like they were gearing up for war. And now, because he'd lost his temper, because he'd snapped, they had more reason than ever to treat him like a threat. His hands trembled as he rested them on the steering wheel. Not from fear, but from frustration. He was tired of being outnumbered. Tired of being provoked. Tired of carrying the weight of a family name that was spoken only in past tense. For a long moment, he stared at the trees lining the roadside, dark shadows against the light. His reflection in the cracked window looked like a stranger, eyes haunted, jaw set like stone. Derek exhaled slowly. He couldn't undo today. The damage was done. But he could make a choice moving forward. Either heed Laura's warning, or keep following this path that had already destroyed too much of his family. He closed his eyes, gripping the wheel again. For now, he would drive home. Clean the wounds. Pretend he was fine. But deep down, Derek knew this wasn't over. The Argents had given him a warning. He had answered it. And when two sides trade warnings in blood, the storm always comes next. Back at high school. Lucas's perspective. Lunch had settled into something of a routine, something I didn't think I'd ever say about this school. Same table, same three people. Me, Malia, and Isaac. It was strange, but in a good way. Strange because our conversations weren't about full moons, claws, or hunters for once. Instead, it was Isaac complaining about the lacrosse coach, Malia rolling her eyes at half the people in the cafeteria, and me trying not to laugh at either of them. Coach still won't put me on the field, Isaac groaned, stabbing at his mashed potatoes. Bench. Every single time. I'm starting to think he just doesn't like my face. Can't blame him, Malia deadpanned. Isaac narrowed his eyes. Wow. Brutal. I almost choked on my sandwich, trying to stifle a laugh. The two of them had gotten good at this back and forth, Isaac throwing lines, Malia smacking them down. But underneath it, there was comfort. Familiarity. The kind you only got when people started becoming real friends, not just people who shared secrets about the moon. For a while, it felt normal. No worries about the next problem creeping out of the shadows. Just lunch. Just teenagers being teenagers. And then I saw her. Erica. Sitting alone, 2 tables away. A tray with barely touched food. Head down, shoulders hunched like she wanted to disappear into the plastic chair. The cafeteria noise rolled right past her. I frowned, putting down my drink. Malia followed my gaze. The sick girl. She asked quietly, though not unkindly. I nodded. Then, without overthinking it, I raised my voice just enough. Hey, Erica. Come sit with us. Isaac blinked, surprised. Malia tilted her head but didn't object. Erica looked up, startled, like she wasn't sure I was actually talking to her. After a pause, she stood, picked up her tray, and walked over. The moment she sat down, the tension I expected didn't come. Instead, something else happened. Erica smiled faintly when Isaac cracked another joke about the coach. She laughed, actually laughed, when Malia made a cutting remark about half the cheerleaders. And when I asked if she was okay after gym, she rolled her eyes and said, "I've had worse." It wasn't forced. It wasn't awkward. It just fit. The four of us ate, talked, teased each other. Erica blended in like she'd been sitting with us all along. For the first time in a long while, I looked around at the table and felt something I hadn't expected to feel here in Beacon Hills. A pack. Not just in the supernatural sense, but in the real one. Friends. Chapter 96. Bath. Lucas's perspective. The drive back to Lockwood Estate was quiet, Jenny humming along with the radio, me replaying the day in my head. When we pulled into the long driveway, I didn't expect to see Susan's car already parked by the steps. She usually wasn't home this early. Inside the mansion, Milo was the first to greet us. His tail wagged, ears perked, and he bounded straight to Jenny before circling back to me, practically demanding attention. Jenny crouched down, giggling, and Milo responded with an affectionate nuzzle. That's when Susan appeared from the hall. She gave Milo a long look, then turned her gaze toward me. With a subtle tilt of her head, she gestured toward her study. "Jenny, keep Milo company," I said gently. "I'll be right back." Jenny nodded, too caught up in rubbing Milo's ears to pay us much mind. Inside the study, the air felt heavier. The shelves of leather-bound books loomed over us, the late afternoon sunlight cutting sharp lines across the floor. Susan closed the door and turned toward me. "The staff complained about Milo," she began, her tone measured but not harsh. "They tried to give him a bath. He wouldn't let them near him. Hid in your room until now." I didn't respond immediately, just waited. Her eyes narrowed, thoughtful. "He's not just shy, is he?" I met her gaze. No use dodging. The vet basically confirmed it. Milo's been through some things before we found him. For a long moment, Susan was quiet. I could see her weighing the words, her expression softer than usual. "Does Jenny know?" she asked finally. I shook my head. "No. And there's no reason for her to." Susan exhaled slowly, folding her arms. "I've heard dogs like that, it's difficult for them to trust humans again." "I know," I said. "But you don't need to worry. Milo won't hurt Jenny or anyone else. I'll train him myself." Her eyes lingered on me, searching, before she replied. "I wasn't suggesting we get rid of him. I was going to say, maybe we hire a professional dog trainer. But if you think you can handle it, then go ahead." That caught me off guard. From what I have seen, trust wasn't something Susan handed out lightly. "Thank you," I said, meaning it. She gave the faintest smile, the kind you could almost miss. "You care about him. That's good. Jenny needs someone in her corner who sees things the way you do." Something eased in me then. Despite the distance between us, I realized that Susan wasn't cold. She understood, more than she let on. And she was giving me space to prove myself. "I'll start with something simple," I said after a pause. "Jenny and I will give him a bath. Together. Make it part of his routine." Susan nodded. "Then I'll leave it in your hands." As I left her study, I realized something had shifted. Not just about Milo, but between Susan and me. Beneath the mansion's polished walls and the distance between us, we were starting to open up to each other. And for the first time, I appreciated how much that mattered, a fact that became even clearer when Jenny's eyes went wide at the mention of giving Milo a bath. "A bath? You mean like, actually in the tub?" "Yes, Jenny," I said flatly, "the dog has to be clean." Jenny scrunched her nose. "This feels like punishment disguised as responsibility." Milo, as if sensing what was about to happen, backed away slowly and sat by the door, ears pinned and eyes wary. He wasn't growling, but his whole posture screamed, "Don't you dare." I crouched down in front of him. "It's okay, Milo. Just water. Nothing bad." My voice carried more than words. I let the calm flow through me, my aura brushing against his mind. His stiff shoulders loosened, and his ears perked a little. Jenny watched, fascinated. "You make it look like magic. With me, he acts like a stubborn toddler." "Because you let him get away with things," I teased. "He knows I won't." It took both of us to guide him into the bathroom. Jenny laid towels across the floor while I filled the tub with lukewarm water. Milo stood stiffly by my side, his gaze fixed on the water like it was a trap. I rested a hand on his back. Safe. Trust me. This time, he didn't resist when I lifted him into the tub. He didn't love it either. His paws shifted uneasily against the porcelain, but he didn't fight. Jenny giggled nervously, kneeling beside us with a cup. Okay, Milo, first rinse. She scooped water and gently poured it down his back. Milo twitched, startled, but didn't move away. That's it, I murmured, my voice steady and calm. Good boy. Piece by piece, we worked through it. Jenny lathered shampoo into his fur, her hands gentle, while I kept my arm across his chest, grounding him. Whenever he got tense, I leaned in, whispered reassurance, and let the werewolf edge of my presence steady him. Lucas, Jenny whispered after a while, he's actually letting us do this. I thought he'd freak out. He wants to trust, I said. He just needs to know it's safe. We avoided the wound on his back leg, washing carefully around it. I made sure no soap or water touched it, keeping his healing skin clean. By the end, Milo was soaked, shampoo rinsed, his fur sleek and heavy with water. Jenny wrapped him in a towel so big he looked like a furry burrito. Oh my god, he's so cute like this. Milo gave a little shake, spraying water across the bathroom. Jenny squealed. I just sighed. 10 minutes later, Milo was dry enough to pad happily around the hall, his fur fluffier than I'd ever seen. He wagged his tail at Jenny, then nudged my hand with his nose as if to say okay, I guess that wasn't so bad. Jenny smiled brightly. See? Teamwork. Yeah, I said, scratching behind Milo's ears. Teamwork. It was a simple thing, a bath. But standing there with Jenny laughing, Milo splashing water on the walls, and me just feeling us all getting closer, it felt like family. Chapter 97. Mirror. The Argent House. The air in the Argent basement was heavy, smelling faintly of oil and steel. Weapons lined the walls, bows, crossbows, blades, everything polished, sharp, ready. Chris Argent stood at the workbench, methodically cleaning a handgun even though it was already spotless. His wife, Victoria, leaned against a cabinet, arms crossed, her sharp eyes never missing a detail. Across from them, 3 hunters shifted uneasily, their bodies stiff, bandaged from fresh bruises and cuts. The oldest, a grizzled man with gray in his beard, finally cleared his throat and spoke. We did as you asked, Chris. We delivered your warning, told Hale to back off and stop sniffing around. He didn't take kindly to it, but he didn't act until, he hesitated, flicking a glance at the younger of the 3. The young hunter, maybe barely out of his 20s, stood with his chin raised defiantly despite the purple swelling along his jaw. Until someone decided it was smart to insult the Hale dead, the older man finished, his voice low with frustration. Chris set the gun down with a sharp clack. He looked at the younger hunter, his face unreadable. Did you? The boy didn't flinch. He needed to know his family wasn't as noble as he thinks. That they brought ruin on themselves. Chris's jaw tightened, but his voice stayed calm, cold. What I asked you to do was deliver a warning. Not provoke. Not escalate. Do you understand the difference? The boy sneered. He would have hit us no matter what. No, Chris said flatly. He wouldn't have. Derek Hale is many things, but reckless isn't one of them. You pushed him. The silence that followed was sharp enough to cut. Chris stepped closer, his presence suddenly heavy. Listen to me carefully. If you ever disobey my orders again, if you ever drag our family into your pride, I won't just bench you. You'll be done. Gone. No place with us. Are we clear? The young hunter swallowed, the defiance finally cracking. Yes, sir. Chris held his gaze a moment longer before turning away. Good. Leave. The 3 hunters made their exit, the sound of their boots fading up the basement steps. For a long moment, the basement was quiet except for the faint hum of the old light bulb overhead. Victoria broke the silence first, her voice measured. This was partly our fault. Chris glanced at her, brow furrowed. She pushed off the cabinet and moved closer. You know as well as I do, our people look for excuses to fight, especially the younger ones. We let them carry weapons, let them hunt, but sometimes they forget the weight of what that means. If we can't control them, we shouldn't be surprised when they make things worse. Chris exhaled slowly, leaning back against the workbench. I wanted Hale to back down, to keep his distance. Not to put 3 of ours in the hospital. Victoria shook her head. Then don't push it further. Don't make this worse. Let it lie. He studied her for a moment, then gave a slow nod. You're right. She stepped closer, lowering her voice. We came to Beacon Hills for answers, Chris. For what happened 6 years ago. But maybe the Hales are as blind as we are. They lost family that night too. I don't think they know any more than we do. Chris's face softened, though the lines of worry never left it. So what are you saying? I'm saying, given our history, we should stay away from the Hales. As much as possible. Chris looked at the weapon still sitting on the workbench, then back at his wife. He nodded once, decisive. Then that's what we'll do. The Hale house. The Hale house study was quiet except for the faint ticking of the grandfather clock in the corner. The shelves were lined with old books and a few framed photographs of a family much larger than the one left standing now. The weight of absence hung in the room like a ghost. Laura sat behind the desk, her posture straight, her eyes sharp as flint. Derek stood in front of her with his arms folded, though his shoulders carried tension. Malia lingered nearby, leaning against the wall with her arms crossed, watching with a mixture of curiosity and unease. Derek had just finished recounting the incident before, the gas station, the three hunters, the warning, the insult that had cut too deep, and the fight that had followed. His words had been clipped, heavy with frustration, but honest. Laura let the silence stretch for a beat, her expression unreadable. Then, finally, she spoke. I told you, her voice cut through the room, steady but sharp, to stay away from them. Derek looked down, jaw clenched, the muscles in his face tight. He didn't answer because there was no excuse to give. Laura stood, moving around the desk, her gaze locked on her brother. And instead of listening, you stalked them for days. You brought yourself into their line of sight. You made yourself a problem. Laura, Derek began, but she cut him off. No. Enough. Her tone was sharper now, her alpha voice ringing through the room. The Argents aren't harmless, Derek. They've killed our kin before, and they will again if we give them a reason. Getting involved with them, chasing them, only makes things worse for us. Malia shifted against the wall, her expression grim but silent. Laura's gaze softened for a moment, but only slightly. You think you're protecting us by keeping an eye on them. But what you've done is stir a nest. This fight. This mess. She gestured sharply. It's on us now, because you started it. And it ends here. Derek's head dipped lower, reluctant but unable to argue. He muttered, almost under his breath, I just didn't trust them. You don't have to, Laura said firmly. You only have to stay away. Do you understand me? Derek's silence stretched again, but finally he gave a small, tight nod. Laura's gaze then flicked to Malia. And that goes for you too. From now on, no one from this family goes near the Argents. Malia straightened and gave a short nod. Understood. Laura looked back at Derek, waiting. Reluctantly, he nodded again, slower this time, his voice low. Fine. Laura studied him for a long moment before finally stepping back. The authority in her stance never wavered, but there was a flicker of worry in her eyes, a sister who knew how stubborn her brother could be. Good, she said at last. Then we're done here. The clock ticked on. The unspoken truth lingered in the silence. Derek had agreed, but neither Laura nor Malia truly believed he would let this go. Chapter 98. Milo's Checkup. Lucas's perspective. A few days later, I was back behind the wheel of my car, Milo sitting in the passenger seat like he owned it. His head was sticking just far enough out of the open window that his tongue lolled in the wind, tail thumping happily against the leather seat. He looked nothing like the wary, half-starved dog we'd first brought home. Living at the Lockwood estate had changed him. The wide gardens, the quiet halls, and maybe even Jenny's endless chatter had worked some magic. He was no longer just a dog that survived, he was a dog that lived. I glanced at him as we drove. His fur caught the morning light, and his eyes, once dulled with fear, now sparkled with life. Susan had been right, though. Jenny adored Milo, no question about that. But adoration didn't equal responsibility. If I left things entirely in her hands, Milo would be fat and spoiled in less than a month. She'd smuggle bacon off her plate for him at every meal, sneak him into her room past bedtime, and probably dress him in ridiculous sweaters. The staff already had enough complaints. So the bulk of Milo's care had fallen to me. The feeding, the training, the walks. Not that I minded. He listened to me. Trusted me. Maybe even saw me as his pack. We pulled into the Beacon Hills Animal Clinic, and I parked. Milo hopped down from the seat, stuck close to my leg, and together we walked inside. The place was quieter than usual, just the one receptionist at the desk. A faint antiseptic smell lingered in the air. Deaton greeted us with his usual calm nod and led us into the exam room. Milo was hesitant at first, ears twitching back, but one glance at me was all it took for him to steady. I rested my hand gently on his side while Deaton checked the healing wound on his leg. After a moment, Deedon straightened with a small smile. He's healed completely. No more infection. His leg is as good as new. I nodded, running a hand through Milo's fur as he wagged his tail proudly, almost like he understood every word. But it's not just the wound, Deedon continued, studying Milo with something between curiosity and admiration. When he came in last week, he was tense, terrified of everything around him. Now, aside from a bit of standard vet nerves, he's calm. Comfortable. He gave me a knowing look. That's a rare change, Lucas. A good one. I shrugged lightly. Perks of being a werewolf, I guess. Deedon shook his head, smiling in that quiet, thoughtful way of his. Honestly, after all these years working with animals, I've realized we really don't give them enough credit for how smart and aware they actually are. And they are better judges of character than we are. They can sense things we overlook. Milo didn't heal this quickly because you're a werewolf. He healed because he trusts you. I blinked, glancing down at Milo, who looked up at me with those bright blue eyes, tail wagging like he agreed. I gave his head a small pat. If you say so, Doc. Deedon smirked. I do say so. Now, one more thing. His fur is overgrown. Acceptable for now, but if it gets any longer, it'll start irritating him. A week ago, I wouldn't have suggested it, he would have been too anxious. But now, I think he's ready for a grooming visit. I raised an eyebrow. You sure he can handle that? Deedon nodded. I think you'll be surprised. Milo gave a happy little bark, as if he was already in on the conversation. Guess we'll find out, I said, scratching him behind the ear. After leaving the clinic, I drove Milo straight to the nearest groomer Deedon had recommended. The place had the faint smell of shampoo and wet fur clinging to it, with posters of smiling dogs taped on the windows. Milo hopped out of the car, sniffing the air with cautious curiosity. The moment we stepped inside, though, his ears twitched back. He spotted the tables, the sinks, the buzzing clippers, and his body stiffened. For a second, I thought he might bolt. I crouched down, resting a hand on his neck. Easy. My alpha side reached out, silent, instinctive. A pulse of reassurance, steady and calm, telling him he was safe. That nothing here would hurt him. His body relaxed instantly. Milo's tail even gave a cautious wag, and he sniffed the floor before curiously eyeing one of the groomers who came over. Well, aren't you handsome? The woman said, kneeling slightly. Milo tilted his head and, instead of shying away, took a step toward her. He's surprisingly calm, another groomer said, exchanging a glance with the first. Most big dogs are a handful, especially on their first visit. He's very well behaved. I gave Milo a pat as they clipped on the grooming lead. Guess he knows when to mind his manners. One of them smiled. You've done a good job with him. Don't worry, we'll take great care of him. Milo looked back at me once, as if for confirmation. I nodded, and that was all he needed. He followed the groomers inside without so much as a whine. I headed to the waiting area, a row of cushioned chairs lined up against the wall. It was quiet, the hum of dryers coming from behind a door, and the faint chatter of workers drifting through. I let out a breath and leaned back, already picturing how ridiculous Milo might look once they were done with him. The bell above the door jingled. I glanced up, and froze. Lydia Martin walked in, leash in hand, her tiny designer dog trotting along beside her. She looked effortlessly put together, as if she'd walked out of a fashion ad. Her eyes scanned the room, then landed on me. Her lips curved into a slow, knowing smile. Of all the people to run into here, it had to be her. Chapter 99. Waiting Room. Lucas's perspective. Lydia handed her tiny dog over to the groomers with the kind of ease that screamed she'd done this dozens of times before. Then, instead of choosing one of the many empty seats, she sank into the chair right next to me. Close enough that her perfume, something floral, sharp, and warm all at once, cut through the scent of wet fur and soap in the air. Fancy seeing you here, she said, crossing her legs, voice carrying that lilt she used when she wanted someone's full attention. You and I keep running into each other in the strangest places. I kept my gaze forward. Coincidence. That's all. She leaned in slightly, smile daring. You don't sound thrilled. Most guys would kill for this much of my time. Most guys don't know better, I muttered, trying to sound firmer than I felt. This is a bad idea, Lydia. Her eyes gleamed, like she'd been waiting for me to say it. Oh, come on. You make it sound like I'm plotting a scandal. It's not that serious. We're just having a little fun. I turned to meet her gaze, steady. No. It doesn't work like that with me. For a moment, she held my stare. Then, with a little shrug, She leaned back, as if she could drop the flirtation at will. The silence stretched long enough that I thought maybe that was the end of it. But then she spoke again, casual, her tone almost light. So, what's his name? The dog you brought in. Milo, I said. Cute. Bet he's got you wrapped around his paw already. The way she said it had an edge of teasing, but her smile this time was softer, less sharp. And somehow, we slid from there into an easy rhythm, bantering about dogs, school, even coach's ridiculous gym routines. She slipped in a few sly comments, a double meaning here, a lingering glance there, but it wasn't the act she put on in the hallways. This was different. She wasn't hiding behind the dumb popular girl mask. With me, she was clever, cutting, and genuinely funny. I caught myself laughing more than once, and every time I did, I realized how dangerous this was becoming. Because underneath the caution and the warnings I'd given myself, the pull toward her was real. When the lull came, one of those quiet pauses where words weren't necessary, I looked at her. She looked back. Neither of us blinked. You're right, I heard myself say. It's just two people having fun. Her smile was slow, almost victorious, but her eyes burned with the same unspoken hunger I felt. Without a word, we stood, discreet, careful not to draw attention. She led the way, heels clicking softly against the tile floor, toward the bathroom at the back of the groomers. The tension had finally snapped. Lydia's perspective. The bathroom door clicked shut behind us, and before I could even take a breath, Lucas's mouth was on mine. It was desperate, hungry, the kind of kiss that made every thought scatter like glass on tile. I pressed back just as fiercely, my hands tangled in his shirt, pulling him closer, refusing to let the heat between us die for even a second. He didn't just kiss, he guided. With a steadying hand at the small of my back, he led me toward the stalls, never once breaking the rhythm. We slipped inside, the lock clicking behind us, sealing us away in our little stolen world. I couldn't believe how intense it was. I've kissed boys before, played games with Jackson, teased others just for the thrill of it, but this was fire. It wasn't a performance, wasn't something I staged for control or attention. It was real, raw, and terrifyingly good. Every touch set me alight, every brush of his hand drew me deeper into something I couldn't name, only feel. My body answered his instinctively, like we'd been made to fit together this way. It was almost animalistic, the heat, the need, the way neither of us seemed able to stop. My breath came in sharp little gasps against his lips, my nails curled against his shoulders as if holding on was the only way to survive the storm he'd pulled me into. My back brushed the stall, but I hardly noticed. What filled my senses were his hands, firm, searching, careful where they lingered. I felt heat spark each time his touch found a new place, my skin alive under the path of his fingertips. I let my own hands wander in turn, exploring the lines of his shoulders, the shape of his chest, the way his body answered my touch. My breath caught as his hands finally reached the place I'd been unconsciously aching for. The sudden focus of his touch sent a shiver rushing through me, my body answering before I could think. My fingers tightened against him, clutching at his shoulders as if to steady myself, but my response betrayed the swell of heat that carried me deeper into him. And then it hit me, the dizzying rush, the trembling, the helpless surrender to the moment. I didn't think, didn't care, I just let it sweep me away. For the first time in forever, I wasn't in control, and shockingly, I didn't want to be. Even after the waves passed, I couldn't stop. My lips found his again and again, softer now, lingering, as if I could keep the glow burning just by staying connected. My whole body felt like it was humming, alive in a way I hadn't known I was missing. When we finally pulled apart, my hair was a little wild, my pulse still racing. I caught a glimpse of myself in the mirror as we slipped back into the waiting area, and I almost laughed. I was glowing, unmistakably, as if I'd swallowed the sun. I took my seat beside him, crossing one leg over the other, calm and composed on the outside. But inside, I was still trembling with satisfaction, still replaying the fire of his touch. And the strangest part of all, I couldn't wait for it to happen again. Chapter 100. Unexpected. Lucas's perspective. Milo looked like a whole new dog when the groomers finally brought him out. Gone was the shaggy, wild look, trimmed down, he looked sharper, leaner, almost wolfish. His blue eyes gleamed as he trotted straight toward me, tail wagging, as if he'd just been through a spa day and knew he looked good. Beside him, the groomers led out the smaller, pampered-looking dog with glossy fur and a ribbon tied neatly at the collar. Lydia immediately lit up. There you are, Prada. She bent down, scooping her dog into her arms before giving Milo a once-over. And wow, he's a big, handsome boy. Where did you get him? I crouched, giving Milo a pat between his ears. He actually found us. He was a stray. Her brow arched slightly, eyes flicking between Milo and me. Some stray, she said with a half smile, like she didn't quite buy it. Lydia set Prada down, and to my surprise, the little dog made a beeline for me, tail wagging furiously. I knelt and offered a hand, and Prada immediately licked it. Lydia blinked. That's odd. Prada usually doesn't like anyone but me. I smirked. He's got great taste. She blushed, just a flicker of pink across her cheeks, before quickly straightening her expression, smoothing it back into that calm mask she wore so well. Prada, emboldened, turned his tiny frame toward Milo and let out a bark, trying to act like the big dog in the room. Milo didn't even twitch. He simply looked up at me, waiting. I shook my head once, and Milo turned away, utterly ignoring the challenge. Lydia noticed, her lips curving into the faintest grin. A few minutes later, we stepped out of the groomers with both dogs in tow. The late afternoon air was warm, and on impulse, I stopped at a vendor nearby. 2 dog ice creams, I said, handing over a bill, and 2 regular ones. We sat on a bench while Prada happily devoured his treat and Milo carefully enjoyed his. Lydia and I ate ours, talking between bites. It was easy. Too easy. Her voice softened when she spoke to me, free of the polished edge she usually wore at school. She told me about places I should check out in Beacon Hills, the Preserve, an old bookstore, the coffee shop everyone swore by. Every so often, she'd drop in a playful remark, something sly that could be read as flirtation or just banter, depending on how I chose to take it. And the truth was, I liked it. For once, it didn't feel like a game. It felt like 2 people enjoying each other's company over melting ice cream and wagging tails. We walked until we reached her car. Prada hopped into the passenger seat while Lydia checked her phone. It rang, and the name flashing on the screen made her expression shift instantly. Jackson. She answered, and I watched in silence as the mask fell into place. Her tone turned light, easy, casual. Yeah, just ran into Lucas at the groomers, she brought up in the middle of the conversation, breezy as if it meant nothing. She laughed at something he said, her performance flawless. By the time she hung up, Jackson had bought it completely. She lingered a moment, hand on the door, looking at me. That was a lot more fun than I expected, she admitted, her smile softer than before. I nodded, but said nothing. She slid into her car, Prada settling in her lap, and with a last glance my way, she drove off. I stood there for a beat longer, Milo at my side, the taste of ice cream still on my tongue. A few hours later. The parking lot was almost empty, the silence of the night broken only by the faint buzz of a flickering lamp overhead. Derek's boots echoed on the asphalt as he crossed toward his car, shoulders tense after a long day. He was halfway to the driver's side when something thudded hard against the hood. Derek froze. A body. The corpse of a man sprawled across the metal, limbs hanging limp. The metallic tang of blood hit Derek's nose before his eyes fully adjusted. Recognition came sharp and fast. The younger hunter. The one with too much mouth at the gas station. The one who had spat on the memory of Derek's family. Derek's heart dropped into a steady, furious beat. He looked up, scanning the lot. That was when he saw it, a figure darting away, moving fast. A blur in the dark, broad-shouldered, too quick for human. Werewolf. Derek sprinted after it, claws threatening to break free, but the thing was fast, at least faster than it should have been. He turned corners, cut through rows of cars, but within seconds, the figure vanished into the night. Panting, Derek slowed, eyes narrowed. Something about the way it moved, animalistic, yes, but wrong. Sloppy, unbalanced. Not like any werewolf he'd hunted with or fought against before. He didn't have time to think it through. Derek rushed back to his car. The hunter's body still lay across the hood, lifeless eyes staring at nothing. Whoever did this wanted it found here. Wanted him framed. Damn it. With a grimace, Derek dragged the corpse off the hood, lowering it to the pavement. He wiped his hands on his jeans, then slid behind the wheel, forcing himself to stay calm. The Argents were going to find this. And when they did, they'd point the finger straight at him. As Derek drove into the dark, the weight in his chest grew heavier. He could already feel the trap closing in.